Random thoughts. In this video, I'm going to read parts or a part of Sir Richard Burton's book, First Steps in East Africa, Exploration of Harar, where he talks about the poetry of the Somali people. This is a book, of course, published 1850s, and it is a book where he tells us about his journey from Aden to Zeila, then to Harar. He had been sent by the British to collect information that the British needed to capture the port of Berbera. So he was on a mission. He was a spy, so we should not lose that fact about him. So I know there are several people, not one, not two, not three. I think close to 10 people actually, who've left me comments on TikTok and also on YouTube telling me that if you want to understand the Somali people, you have to understand their poetry, because poetry is very important in the culture of the Somali people. It's true poetry that the culture seems to be preserved, and it's true poetry that the people communicate the most critical pieces of information, not just within the generation, but also with the next generation. And so somebody or very many people have told me that. And then I'm reading this book and I find a place where Sir Richard Burton talks about the poetry of the Somali people. And he seems to be so impressed by their poetry, and he describes it, what it is. And he seems to wonder how it happened that the Somali did not write, but they came up with such complex poetry culture. He makes that point of it does not match that the Somalis don't write, but then they have this very complex poetry, we can say, culture. And but he says something that made me lose hope, because I remember I was having a conversation with one person and I was like, maybe I should put aside some time to try to learn and understand the poetry of the Somali. But then Richard Burton says it's very complex, the way he says it, and outsiders struggle a lot to understand it. He says even the Arabs who came and lived among the Somalis would often not understand or not comprehend the messages or the themes in some of the poetry that would be recited by the people, and only the people themselves will understand what that poetry or that piece of poetry is about. So it seems like it's not an easy thing to do, especially as an outsider, to go into the community and try to understand their poetry. So I'm going to read that part where he talks about the poetry of the Somali people. He says, the Somali language is no longer unknown to Europe. It is strange that a dialect which has no written character should so abound in poetry and eloquence. So this is the line where he says, it's like he is perplexed that this language was not written, but it had an abound in poetry and eloquence. So he seems like he expected that with that kind of eloquence and such amount of poetry, there should be writing. He continues, there are thousands of songs, some local and others general, upon all conceivable subjects, such as camel loading, drawing water, and elephant hunting. Every man of education knows a variety of them. The rhyme is imperfect, being generally formed by the syllable hey, pronounced as in our word hey, which gives the verse monotonous regularity, but assisted by a tolerably regular alliteration and cadence. It can never be mistaken for prose. So you can tell this is poetry by the way it is arranged. That's the point he's trying to make. Even without the song, which invariably accompanies it. The country teems with poets, poetasters, poetitos, poetacios. I don't know what will be the difference of all these people, but he makes the point that the country is full of people who practices poetry in one way or another. Every man has his recognized position in literature and accurately defined as though he had been reviewed in a century of magazines. So I found this statement very interesting, because that tells you that the people were so much into poetry that some people will become what we can call experts, and they can rise up to the extent that they are so, of course, respected for that. And he says, the fine ear of these people causing them to take the greatest pleasure in harmonious sounds and poetical expressions, whereas false quantity or a prosaic phrase excites their violent indignation. He throws in some negativity there, but okay. He continues to say, many of these compositions are so idiomatic that Arabs settled for years among the Somali cannot understand them, though perfectly acquainted with the conversational style. So the Arabs stay with these people for a long time and they understand the conversation, the language, like it is used every day, but they still struggle to understand the poetry. And that's why I said I lost hope when I read that part. And he says, every chief in the country must have a panegyric to be sung by his clan. And the great patronize light literature by keeping a poet. So people of means will even have a poet that they become a patron to, and maybe they pay them to some extent. It seems like the Somalis had this thing of being a patron to a creative, which is not common in the rest of Africa, unfortunately, unless I'm wrong. It's not indigenous in the rest of Africa to have people of means being like patrons to creatives. People might support creatives, but it wasn't in the ways that it is described in this book. He continues to say, the amatory is, of course, the favorite theme. So like most societies, seems like there was a genre, we can say a subgenre of the Somali poetry that was about romance and romantic themes. Seems like he's saying that, or he says by amatory, that's what he means. And he says that it's the favorite theme. Sometimes it appears in dialogue, the rudest form, we are told, of the drama. The subjects are frequently pastoral. The lover, for instance, invites his mistress to work with him towards the well in Lahelo, a cardia of the land. He compares her legs to the tall, straight liby tree and imprecates the direst curses on her head if she refuses to drink with him the milk of his favorite camel. There are a few celebrated ethical compositions which the father lavishes upon his son all the treasures of Somali good advice, long as the somniferous sermons of Mentor to the insipid son of Ulysses. So, besides the romantic poetry, there was also this poetry that, for example, it's like a father giving the son advice of life, and it will be detailed, of course, and with all the advice or much of the advice that the young man might need in his life. He says sometimes black Taratas breaks into a wild lament for the loss of warriors or territory. Sometimes the poetry will, of course, mourn losses at the battlefield, the people they've lost. He taunts the clan with cowardice. The poet can taunt the clan that you people have cowardice, reminds them of their slain kindred, better men than themselves, whose spirit cannot rest unavenged in their gory graves, and urges a furious onslaught upon the exulting victor. So it seems like there was poetry for everything in this society. Maybe there still is, and I would like to hear from people watching me who come from the Somali community. I want to hear more about the culture of poetry in that community. I know people, like I said, very many people have told me, if you want to understand the Somali history, culture, and everything about the Somali, it's so important for you to understand the poetry of the Somali people. So I would like to know, is it still the same that poetry is recited today like it used to be, or things have changed so much that culture is being lost, which will be very unfortunate, of course. But of course, it's the same thing in different other African communities that storytelling, poetry, songs are lost or are getting lost because we are being made to think that ours is not good. What came from the West maybe is the best. Those are my random thoughts.